all new Mr. Chris Show Underground. Once again, bringing to light what the dark powers keep hidden. And now, Mr. Chris.
1861, Fredericksburg, Shiloh, Gettysburg. Well, of course, these are names, and that's a date associated with one of the bloodiest battles for the Americans in the American Civil War in the 1800s. There's another word associated with this event, secession. And I'm sure that people know that secession came before the actual war. Well, there are many states today, primarily on the coast, that are touting the same thing, secession. However, in this case, it has to do regarding an election. The 2020 election coming up is such that the stakes are high. We've already spoken about it and everything connected with it. But is it possible that states are willing to risk everything to secede and to plunge us into another civil war? And it seems like the powers that be behind the scenes are promoting this idea and getting people comfortable with it. Is this in our future? Is this something that will come to fruition? And furthermore, has this been already predicted by a person who claims to be a time traveler? Well, we have a guest, once again, who has given us all kinds of information. And we are going to explore this topic and the predictions that were made. And that's coming up right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.
The views expressed on the Mr. Chris Show are not necessarily those of Mr. Chris, his guests, sponsors, advertisers, or broadcast providers. The content provided by the Mr. Chris Show is intended solely for the purpose of entertainment. Reference to any persons, places, objects, or ideas is strictly coincidental. Everything presented herein is the exclusive copyright of the Mr. Chris Show.
As promised, once again, we have none other than Estas K. Brown as the guest, speaking with us and once again, not only enlightening us, but educating us to many, many things based on his unique position and his talents. And once again, we are going to be exploring something that could be coming up in our near future, something that has many implications for possibly years or decades to come. So, Mr. Brown, are you with us?
Hello, Mr. Chris. I am online.
Great. It's great to hear you again, and I hope that things work out better this time for us based on various changes we've made. Last time there was some signal tracing issues, and I hope things don't get out of hand this time. So, you have spoken with us many times before about the deep state, the Illuminati, and specifically John Titor and his predictions. And what's coming up, what the states are talking about, is secession and leading to civil war. And that is something that you've told me before that plays into this and these predictions exactly. But what you told me recently was even more astounding because of the little hint about education in all of this. And that is amazing. So why don't you tell us some more? Take it away.
Well, Mr. Chris, specifically on the topic of John Titor, I mean, he had made quite a few predictions. Some very short, succinct, and to the point. But for the era in which he made those predictions, some of these predictions didn't seem to make sense, which, from my perspective, after having studied them for quite some time, I came to the conclusion that he pretty much made statements that would be applicable to the time when the time would arise. And anyone that really paid attention to him when he had made his predictions or statements would kind of be able to decipher them as a way to understand what was really coming right around the corner, which from my perspective now, that's where we're at. There were certain things that he had claimed specifically. So in the future, he made a statement that the public education system was all online.
Yeah, that's.
Now,
I mean, if you told anybody that a year ago,
that
2 years ago, that would be just completely outrageous. I mean, we've had a slight increase in online education over the last few years, but nothing like what's happened recently. So that prediction is amazing.
Correct. So when I started hearing or reading about the push for online public education, pretty much in every part of the world, my jaw just dropped. And I immediately started thinking about what other predictions or statements John Titor had made that would be fitting for the time when the time arose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean the education factor at home, and also if you look at what he said, it's even more phenomenal than the face value. The face value, of course, is that, yes, we are experiencing something that he predicted. Yet, if you go back to his posts, and when did they occur? The late 90s, is that about right?
No, he came on to the scene roughly, I think sometime around the year 2000. He kept making his posts up until maybe February, March, or April of 2001.
Okay. Well, that's still nearly 20 years ago.
I estimate maybe at least a year's worth of posts. Yeah, correct. It's 20 years ago.
Yeah, and I don't think 20 years ago you could envision a system to do the education remotely over the computer in any reasonable fashion. We did not have the networks and the technology in place to do anything like that. So to make that statement back then, he would either truly be lucky and, just hit one in a million, or he actually saw something and is relaying it back to us.
Some people can make the argument that some of the predictions that he made were logical to conclude as a possibility, even for the era. But even as I read that, I was trying to envision what kind of society would have to exist in order for the population to really accept online education. I mean, we're talking about sacrificing human contact, human relationships. You're now talking about just the way human beings develop psychologically through what we grew up considering to be normal interactions.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a society would have to be really conservative, which I found it hard to believe that a simple civil war would cause something like that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
But now that we're living it, I mean, this pandemic is a good reason in and of itself for a society to be accepting of such a scenario.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I just find, we can talk about it now, and it seems more natural, but I'm just trying to put my mindset back to 20 years ago, and I can't come up with too many possibilities for what he said being a reality back then. I mean, of course, you can make extrapolations. I mean, there's plenty of sci-fis that talk about all sorts of things. But it's not just that one thing that he said. It's one of many things that are all connecting together. Anybody can get something right some of the time. I mean, if you have enough typewriters and enough monkeys, you can produce the works of Shakespeare. But it's kind of hard to have all of these predictions to start lining up as it seems like they're doing.
Well, I mean, to be honest, not every statement or prediction that he made has really come to fruition. And I'd say specifically some of his more critical predictions that people have been expecting to become true, to really become believers in his story, haven't occurred. And I'll give it as an example.
Mm-hmm.
He mentioned that at CERN, the large particle accelerator that's currently in operations over in Sweden, over in Europe, he made a prediction that the scientific discovery that was necessary for his time machine to really come to exist has not occurred yet. And he specifically mentioned that CERN would discover that they were able to produce and manufacture micro black holes. Mm-hmm. And at the time, 2000, and probably for quite a few decades now, science has been theoretically stating that micro black holes were a scientific possibility. Mm-hmm. Except right around that time period, he made that prediction that CERN would make that discovery. And it was common knowledge in the early 2000s, maybe late 1990s as well, that those were some of the experiments that were programmed to occur over at CERN once the construction of the facility would reach to a certain level. Mm-hmm. Now, that has not occurred yet. I mean, yes, we've discovered what's been referred to as a God particle, the Higgs boson, but he never made any kind of prediction with that. Because not that he didn't think it would be important, but his predictions from a scientific perspective were more focused on his time machine requiring certain technology to be discovered in order for him to be able to travel through time. Mm-hmm. And again, he made that prediction, which has not come to fruition yet. However, he didn't say what time that would occur. Now, it could be that that discovery isn't made until after the United States falls into a civil war, which technically, as we've discussed in the past, the United States can be perceived as being in a civil war right now, because there is this clandestine phase of a civil war that really hasn't spilled into the next physical phase.
Sure.
And for all intents and purposes, that seems to be right around the corner, and that's the elections in November.
Right. Well,
so I mean, it's still probable that his prediction could come to fruition sometime after this November. I'm not going to say sometime this year, sometime next year, but that would be a starting point to start counting or expecting some major discovery to be made over at CERN.
Right. Well, like I said, I've been seeing the dots and been connecting them, and I've known people who have not been too interested in what he said, but recently, based on all these events that are happening, there's really quite a compelling case for other things that he said coming to fruition. And of course, based on what we know of alternate universes, time theories and such, it also, I think, follows that it would not be in the exact same order unless he came from our specific timeline, which he didn't.
Correct. Correct.
I know there's various people, and you've disclosed this to me as well, that you have pretty serious concerns about what's coming up this fall and what could happen. And I know there's a lot of people that are prepping, at least in the United States. I still maintain contacts with quite a few people from various areas and walks of life in that country. And there's ammunition shortages, which is a little surprising. I know there was a lot of impulse buying right after the emergency declaration by Trump back in March. But it seems like there's a second wave, not of a virus, but a second wave of concern about something that is happening. And I would like to discuss that more when we get back, but we're going to take a short break here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.
Time travel does indeed exist.
Your child will be taken into the center at the age of 5 and kept until the age of 10. And that is not voluntary.
No way she's going to go into one stupid government-sponsored re-education camp.
Years ago when they started doing this, so it was Roe versus Wade. We had to make it legal to take a human life and get stem cells from it. We didn't have any other way to do it at the time. Therefore, we had the raw material to work with.
Personally handwritten to you from the President of the United States, who we hope by that time will be Hillary.
What you're about to see happen in the Middle East is the economic viability of the region changing hands.
What happens in your future is the Earth shifts its axis. The oceans freeze over. There's no more room for anybody. The population of the world is reduced to 50,000.
It's time for the real truth, the Mr. Chris Show, Mr. Underground.
Okay, so we're back with the one and only Estas K. Brown. And before we went to the break, I was starting to talk about what seems to be happening behind the scenes. I mean, seemed like last year, of course, in March, everybody, especially in the United States, was buying toilet paper, and it's sort of funny because at that time, I remember the Germans laughing at the Americans and calling it the Hamsterkauf, which is the hamster buying. And, you know, hamsters are pack rats, and they take their stuff and hoard it into little corners. Yet it came to roost for them and a bunch of other people as well, too. Now, of course, these days, from my contacts in the States, there's ample toilet paper. However, there is a big shortage of ammunition, handgun ammunition, rifle ammunition. Even guns themselves are very difficult to get in the States. And it's kind of weird because in the United States, I think guns are sold every month, by some huge number, and there's shortages. So it seems like people have a sense, or I guess naysayers would say a fear, that something is about to happen. Is something about to happen, would you say?
I would agree with you for the most part, but then there's a different perspective that I think most sheeple are currently taking. And I've been reading a lot in the news, United States news, specifically where largely democratic states have been releasing large numbers of prisoners from jails due to COVID concerns. In the thousands, and in some cases the tens of thousands, and across various periods. If I'm not mistaken, I think the state of California released like 8,000 prisoners sometime March, April timeframe. Maybe a couple of other times. The most recent one, I think, might have been in July. There was a release of about 18,000 prisoners, also in the state of California, which for the most part, California, I think, is one of the most restrictive states with respect to the Second Amendment, if I'm not mistaken. So,
I think California, New York, Washington, D.C.
Yeah, correct. So many people are from my perspective, the left side of the population are buying firearms more for personal protection. And even more so, I believe, other states, Oregon, where there's apparently a lot of rioting that's occurring. Same thing with Washington State, Seattle specifically, where those leftist states are calling for the abolishment of local law enforcement, defunding the local law enforcement. And I think from that perspective, the leftist population has grown a bit concerned that their government is stooping really to that level, where they would defund police. So naturally, they would try to arm themselves so that they can protect themselves. You never know when one of these prisoners might actually come into your home for whatever reason. You're talking about professional criminals that are unscrupulous and never really had any kind of moral to not take what's not theirs. But at the same time, I believe that there is what's referred to as a patriot movement. People that don't normally live in leftist states or live in conservative regions within leftist states, where they tend to see or perceive that something is right around the corner, and that's those that believe that there's a civil war that is brewing. Yeah, I can tell you from my personal contacts, and as we have discussed before, the United States is really the center of the control mechanisms for the global Illuminati.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the Illuminati will stand next to nothing to prevent losing control of the United States. And I'm here telling you that the Illuminati does control the United States.
Right. Well, and I think it's very easy to see that, because whether or not you want to admit to it one way or another, that the United States is the economic and military power of the world. I mean, I think that's still undisputed. And of course, in a chess game, you don't win by taking a pawn. So that's part of the process, possibly, but that's not the goal of the game. So yeah, the stakes are high, and of course, the United States is the focal point. It's, very simple. I just find it's very interesting that even months after the first run on supplies and such, because of the pandemic, there's many states that are not considered liberal states, where the gun stores, local gun stores, are flooded with business and sold out. In some cases, completely sold out of certain types of ammunition. And it does seem like people are arming themselves and getting prepared. There's definitely change in the air. Things are happening. And, of course, when you have, I don't know what other way to describe it, just morons that are advocating what they've been programmed to say about defunding police, and thinking that the outcome is really going to be a good one, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Criminals have always been around, always will be around, and a criminal that has no reason to stop doing their criminal acts against you or whoever will continue to do so. They're not going to stop in their tracks and change their mind for no reason. So like I said, my contacts are telling me that guns are flying off the shelf. There's back orders. 9mm ammunition in particular is almost impossible to find. Very small quantities here and there. So something is definitely happening, and it's probably not going to be very good.
And I would agree with you. And also, going back to the John Peter story, one of the predictions that he boldly made, that many people have kind of discarded that particular prediction because of the year in which he said that would occur. So he did say that on or around the election of 2004, something would happen that would trigger a physical civil war in the United States. And specifically, he stated that the current president would try and act like an Abraham Lincoln and keep the state from falling apart. Whereas the political counterpart would be a male or female, which I find rather strange as to what's occurring right now. He stated that the winner would actually only care about maintaining power. From a certain perspective, many people believe that those in power or the deep state within the United States, they only care about power. They do not care about a political ideology. The political ideology that they follow is merely just to stir up the public, to stir up support for them. They really do not care about identity politics. It's just a useful tool for them, and that's it. So the fact that the statement that John Peter made that the winner, a he or a she, would only care about maintaining power tells me that the winner would be a deep state candidate. And now, from what I could see, the deep state candidate apparent at this moment is Joe Biden.
Right.
But one thing to keep in mind as well, I'm hearing rumors that the deep state is planning planning on some sort of a coup against the current president, obviously Donald Trump. Specifically, that they would try to forcefully remove him. It's my understanding that the deep state faction is pushing for voting by mail at this point in time.
Right.
Now, voting by mail, according to Donald Trump, is very skeptical, very susceptible to corruption. And it can be used to sway the election. Now, it's my understanding that what the deep state is attempting to do is to cause some doubt in the election results, and in essence, trying to ensure that vote by mail is delayed with the U.S. Postal system taking its time to receive mail and to fully and properly count all of the mail-in votes. The intention is to push the election results beyond the election night as they are normally tallied up by polling stations.
Right.
Now, the intention, it's my understanding, is to, while the votes are tallied up and counted, however long that may take, that the deep state wants to temporarily appoint someone else as an interim president while the results are tallied up. Theoretically, in an election, the president has his running mate, the vice president, but when the election results are in doubt, the vice president does not take power, nor does the opposing political candidate. Seeing that there's no one really defined as being president during that time period, the honor of being president of the United States technically constitutionally falls under the leader of the House of Representatives, which currently is, I believe, Democrat Nancy Pelosi.
That is correct.
So, in theory,
yes, and
when you have someone like that who really does not like Donald Trump, is my understanding, as it is so obvious within mainstream media sources across the world, I do believe she does intend to forcibly remove him. Now, going back to the John Titor timeline, that kind of rather fits the prediction that he had made.
Wow. Well, there's no ifs, ands, or buts regarding her feelings towards Mr. Trump, and that's seen clearly in just about everything that she ever speaks of. Also, she's already made comments to support what it is that you just said, which is she's made mention publicly recently that she is in line for taking presidential control, provided there was no president or vice president in that capacity for various reasons, which is almost alarming in that of itself. But you can see from the State of the Union address what she did with the speech and the papers and tearing them up and everything else. I mean, her I guess, love for the president is definitely not there, which there is a story about the Postal Service, and we're not going to get into that this time.
If I may interrupt, Mr. Chris,
yes.
That was just a political stunt to try and sway the sheeple following, if you ask me. She's following orders from her Illuminati puppet masters.
Yeah.
So she was asked or ordered to do perform some kind of political stuff like that to again sway the leftist following.
Right. And she made it very clear and prominent in what she was doing. She wasn't trying to conceal it. She was obviously making an overt statement, as silly as that was, but she was. But there is a story that's growing regarding the Postal Service and packages, mail that's not delivered, food and other products rotting at postal stations. And there's that is a story in and of itself, and we're not going to get into it right now, but there's plenty of groundwork that's in place, and you can see the pieces are being laid out fairly well on the path for supporting exactly what you're saying. So we're going to take a break in a second, and I want to hear more about this and these predictions, because realistically this is August, and things are going to be happening very soon. So, in my opinion, the fuse has been lit, and what we're going to see from this is going to happen here very shortly. And we'll talk about that when we get back on the Mr. Chris Show Underground.
To unleash the full power of the federal government in this effort today, I am officially declaring a national emergency.
Local and state health officials are reassuring the public that there's no reason to panic.
You can trust respected medical authorities.
We are doing everything possible to combat and contain the coronavirus.
This virus is dangerous. This virus is public enemy number one.
President Trump, however, seems to incapable of acknowledging the fact that that overwhelming number of peace protesters are peaceful and are simply advocating change.
In New York City, dozens of looters seen kicking in windows and breaking into stores across Midtown Manhattan.
I'm the president and you're fake news.
It's time for the real truth. The Mr. Chris Show, Mr. Underground.
Okay, we're back, and we have Estas K. Brown with us, and we're going to continue to just uncover more and more of this, these predictions and how it's relating to the present. I was just going to throw in a couple of things here, and that is we, of course, has talked about this virus situation before, and as you can see worldwide, it seems like the focus on the news as well as television ads seem to kind of be going away from this. It looks like this pandemic has not quite worked out the way they wanted it to, and it's sort of being left behind more and more. The last little vestiges of life that you see in this mantra is the cases. There's still lots of cases. Of course, if you look at the hospitalizations and actual sickness from it, there's nothing. Just like as in the common cold, that there's a lot of people that walk around with a common cold that don't even know they have a cold. So that whole thing is pretty much done. But what's not done is what's being planned if Trump wins the election. And that's something that I wanted you to expound on, because there's a lot of serious consequences for those in various coastal states of the United States. Is that correct?
Correct, Mr. Chris. So there is this underlying plan here that should the elections be so close or that much in Donald Trump's favor, that the liberal states would actually secede from the Union. And again, going back to the liberal or Democrat desire to just maintain power. All it really is, that decision is really only to save face. Another 4 years of a Trump presidency would actually spell the destruction of the deep state within the United States. As we have seen in past administrations, or at least the last 4 administrations, in their second terms, all presidents, essentially it's all no holds barred.
Right.
They just essentially just pass whatever laws that they want passed for the most part.
Right.
And they stop caring about really the other constituents' concerns, whether it's their liberal constituents or their conservative constituents. It doesn't really matter who's in power. As I've mentioned to you before, every president of the United States since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, they have all been secret society members and thereby controlled by the deep state factions in the United States.
Well, now, if the coastal states, obviously, I think it's pretty clear California is probably leading that. But let's say, for the sake of discussion, that California does declare their secession from the Union. I mean, there's a lot of implications with that as far as, I believe, federal funding and other types of interactions. So I don't think it's that simple.
Mr. Chris, keep in mind that the state of California, the economy is ranked as a state in comparison to every nation on earth. It is ranked like the 5th or the 6th strongest economy in the world.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. If California were to secede, you're talking a lot of federal taxes that the union would no longer have. So in theory, it could self-sustain if all the businesses remain status quo. But with the socialist government in place, taxing everything so heavily, taking their Second Amendment rights, in theory, any state that would secede does not technically have to abide by the federal constitution any longer.
Right.
They could instantiate their own constitution, thereby rewriting everything and removing the Second Amendment, changing so many things that it is no longer considered part of the United States, or it never was. But again, high taxation of their the largest tax producers. If you ask me, those businesses would cease to exist, and thereby just reducing their economic power over time.
Well, speaking of secession, it's not quite that, but in New York, there's quite a few apparently wealthy individuals who are pretty much done with New York and have either moved out or in the process of moving out of that state. So I find that kind of interesting as well, that a lot of these states that had the most draconian measures during this whole height of the pandemic are the ones that, at least for some of the people, have sort of awoken from their, I don't know what to call it, but their altered states of, whatever I'm told to believe, I believe. And some people have said, forget this. And I can imagine it happening in California as well, even before.
If you ask me, Mr. Chris,
yes.
We're talking about realist liberals. When you start defunding the police, and you've got chaos on the street that is impacting people's businesses, especially larger corporations. Do you really think they're going to want to hang around and let their business die? No. They're going to move out. And that's one thing that the liberals don't seem to understand. They seem to think that they have so much power over their constituents that they can use them any which way they would like, that they're not going to be willing to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're kind of realizing that that's not the situation. You cut their livelihood, people are going to move out.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, and it's happening. There's speaking to people that I know in other states that are considered red states. There's been a lot of exodus of Californians over the past decade, but recently it seems to be accelerating. Yeah, and you're right. Unless you have businesses in the state and people actually building wealth through the businesses, there's not going to be much of a tax base, and I guess they don't quite get that, other than trying to raise personal taxes on people within the state. But that you can't, after a certain point, you can't raise taxes high enough on the remaining people to pay for everything.
True, but it depends on the perspective. One of the most popular and new leftist political officials in the United States, I forget her name, AOC.
Right.
Or the initials or the acronym that she goes by.
Right.
She's made some pretty broad statements that she would like to tax the rich up to 90%, and in some cases she's even proposed 100%, which makes no sense. Why would anyone want to work for free?
Right.
That's slavery, depending on the perspective, on your perspective.
Yeah. I believe the name you're referring to is Alexandria Cortez.
Yes, that sounds familiar, yes. Yeah. That is the statement that I was thinking of. I can't recall how long ago, but I don't recall if she made that statement as part of her Green New Deal plan.
Right. Right. And part of her Green New Deal plan was to not have any airplanes and air traffic, which I don't know how she plans to move around the world for various things, but maybe by boat.
I think she was planning on a train being constructed to go across the Atlantic Ocean to Europe.
Well, that's almost a whole nother topic. But getting back to this secession and John Teeter, now this is also part of what he predicted, correct?
Correct. Those were some of his electoral predictions that he made. Most people is too lazy to rise up in any way, shape, or form.
Mm-hmm. But now,
as we can see, the way things are heating up, it is likely possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it definitely seems that way, and it's sort of odd that there's been a lot of chatter in the news regarding this whole mail-by fraud, I guess I should call it, problems at the Postal Service, What if Trump doesn't leave office? There's been quotes by retired supposedly U.S. Army officers that have said, well, with the 82nd Airborne needs to be ready to remove Trump if he doesn't want to leave. So it seems like there's a lot of effort to paint a picture for the
players, Mr. Chris.
They're all deep state players?
Correct. Even military personnel. Within the Pentagon, with every aspect of the United States Armed Forces, you've got deep state players all over the place that are ready and waiting to just push this coup.
Mm-hmm. But now, you were saying something about possibly a small nuke being used on the shores of the United States as part of this whole scenario coming up.
Not specifically in the shores. So going back to some of John Teeter's statements and her predictions, when he was part of the 4chan anonymous boards, he always presented himself as a character that was willing to accept and answer questions. Mm-hmm. One of the questions that he was asked specifically is, during the Civil War, would any nuclear weapons be used? And his response was yes. Now, he didn't go into much detail. Theoretically, I believe you can consider the United States as being in a civil war already. It's just most people have not woken up to the fact that federal intergovernmental agencies have been fighting this clandestine civil war. Mm-hmm. Most people have not realized that. So in theory, these false flags like this pandemic or some other false flag event that could be made to look like some terrorist group blew up a nuke in the United States can be considered the use of a nuclear weapon within this civil war, depending on your perspective. Mm-hmm. Obviously, from John Teeter's perspective, he being a historian, looking back into the past, mm-hmm. And really realizing the way things transpired in his timeline, a terrorist narrative pushed by the mainstream media, could be a false flag and also part of the Civil War. But at the same time, right now, as of now, we have not reached a physical phase of the Civil War, which, from my perspective, it's right around the corner. It could be that once some of these states secede, and I think we can safely conclude that the West Coast states, and probably a combination of some East Coast states, New York, Delaware, New Hampshire, can all be part of this secession campaign. And at that point, when things started to get physical, it's not inconceivable to think that nuclear weapons can be used in the event that should happen.
Yeah, and unfortunately,
we're talking about an escalation of a civil war phase there, but that we still don't yet quite see happening.
Right. And unfortunately, the people who would put this plan forward would do it in such a way that it would receive publicity, which means a fairly populated area, unfortunately, with innocent people paying the price.
Correct, and that's the very nature of a false flag.
So, this is all bleak. It would be nice if we had some hope for something in the aftermath. I mean, Is the future all bleak?
Well, Mr. Chris, to be honest with you, the whole purpose of me willing to talk to you about my connections inside and what the plans are I do so with the intention of hoping for people to believe me. It's very hard for me to try and convince people in person because obviously I don't want to give away my identity, the role that that my family has in the world. I have to do things in a clandestine manner as doing. Basically, I don't wake up and realize that the lives that they have been living are really, the lives of the Matrix. And I think in Senator John Cheever's statements, he kind of alludes to a similar conclusion. Doesn't believe that I wake up topics.
The signal broke up just a little bit. Can you repeat that last statement?
Yes, I totally gave up on trying to really believe that I can convince people that they've been living a false reality. And like John Cheever, I believe he ended up concluding the same thing. He really had no faith that they would wake up from the reality that they believe or that they perceive, even though he was telling people that the reality that they live in is not really real.
There's that. Excuse me for a second, Mr. Brown. There's
Mr. Chris.
That's what I thought I heard.
Mr. Chris.
There's a situation outside. Mr. Brown. I need to move positions. Our position's been compromised here. Okay, roundup operations. We have a situation, and we'll have to talk to you next time, right here on the Mr. Chris Show Underground. Okay, everybody, you know what to do. Shut down, move operations, all right? Backup team is on the way. We've trained for this. You know what's at stake. You know what to do. All right, let's go.
Opposition has been compromised. Opposition has been compromised.
Apúrense, vámonos, vamos. Ya tenemos todo listo. Ya están por llegar. Apúrense.
Attention all units. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill.
Apúrense, vámonos, vámonos.
Opposition has been compromised. I repeat, our position has been compromised.
Go, come on.
This is a code Alpha Bravo 9er.
Go.
I repeat, Alpha Bravo 9er.